This is Oregon, this is Washington, this is British Columbia, and this is Sierra Leone. But we don't really care about that last one right now because the first three make up a region known as the Pacific Northwest, or more relevant to this video, Cascadia. So what exactly is Cascadia, and what would it look like as an independent country? Full disclosure, this video is actually being brought to you from Cascadia. Now, while Cascadia does have a bit of an independence movement going on, it's really more of a joke than a serious thing. However, it does reflect both the area's more liberal values and the fact that Oregon and Washington and British Columbia are more similar to each other than they are to, say, New York or Ontario. But that's just because the US and Canada are huge countries. So basically, we're going to be discussing this area and where it would stand in the world if it were its own country. Cascadia, though it could also include parts of Idaho, Northern California, Alaska, Montana, Wyoming, and the Yukon Territory, is generally limited to just Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia, which should hopefully make estimations a bit easier. Some more conservative advocates even put the division closer to the coasts, as the eastern parts of Oregon and Washington are basically North Nevada. Now, first off, the area of Cascadia has a population of around 16 million people and an area of around 1.38 million square kilometers, making it comparable in population to Cambodia and slightly physically larger than Peru. The largest cities in the area would be Seattle, Washington, Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver, British Columbia, coincidentally also the largest cities in each state and province. Out of the 10 biggest cities, 4 of them would be in Washington, 4 in British Columbia, and only 2 would be in Oregon. However, the capitals of each state and province are actually Victoria, British Columbia, Olympia, Washington, and Salem, Oregon. No capital has ever been specified for Cascadia itself, with many speculating it would probably be one of the 3 largest cities. If I were to randomly pick a capital city, however, I would personally pick Olympia, as it's already the capital of Washington, which is the largest of the 3 subdivisions and sits right between the other 2, making it somewhat more geographically advantageous. Cascadia's GDP would be around $825 billion, roughly comparable to the Netherlands, and with a nominal per capita GDP of $40,217, roughly comparable to that of Israel. Cascadia's Human Development Index is a very high 0.914, putting us roughly between Liechtenstein and Japan in 18th place. Cascadia is home to many world-renowned companies, including Microsoft, Amazon, Nike, TELUS, Starbucks, Boeing, and several others. Of course, we're also kind of known for our small businesses, so most of these are based in Seattle anyway. The PNW, as it's also known, is also famously liberal and left-wing leaning, with Oregon and Washington having voted for the Democratic Party in every general election since 1988. Of course, the states both have sizable Republican voting minorities in the east, but most of the overall population lives closer to the coast, making for kind of reverse China. British Columbia is also famously liberal and eco-friendly, though Canadian elections work a bit differently than their American counterparts, making streak measuring a bit more difficult. Either way, it's certainly no doubt that an independent Cascadia would probably become the next Sweden pretty quickly. In actual history, Cascadia was actually administered briefly as the Oregon Country, effectively a dispute between the British and the Americans, which was briefly jointly governed by both sides. The Americans had an extreme claim of up to the 54th parallel, and the British down to the 42nd parallel, giving them a border with Mexico, at the time. The border was eventually set at the much more sensible 49th parallel, and giving Vancouver Island to Canada, but still completely missing Point Roberts. The cities in the area are of course hugely economically interdependent on each other, with the Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver metro areas being theorized to soon become a megalopolis, comprising 17% of the Cascadian landmass, but 80% of its population. The area from Vancouver, British Columbia to Eugene, Oregon is already well connected, and for citizens of either country, the border is actually very easy to cross. Neither Canadians nor Americans have ever needed a visa to cross a common border, and Canada and the US are of course famously friendly to each other. Obviously, Cascadia would probably never happen, especially given that it would effectively be the result of 2 independence movements and 1 unification movement. Also, as the Civil War already got us to decide on, US states cannot legally leave the US. And if British Columbia were to leave, Canada would effectively lose all of its access to the Pacific Ocean. So yeah, that's probably not happening. Regardless, what do you think an independent Cascadia could look like down the road? Will we be better off in our respective countries, or independent from the influences of Washington and Ottawa? Be sure to like, subscribe, start a flame war in the comments, and I will see you next Sunday. Well, actually Saturday, but still.